everyone, it's Caroline or Miss B Overseas. Thank you so much for being here. Today you are getting 2 videos for the price of 1. What does that mean? I don't know why I said it. Basically, I am going to be sharing with you the books that I plan to read in January, and then also how I felt about the books that I read in the month of December. That's right, you are getting my January TBR and then also my December wrap up in this one video. Not gonna lie, initially when I sat down to film this, I have a whole other shirt picked out to wear. I was gonna film 2 videos, and then I hit record and I have all the books in front of me and I'm just like, why? For what? Let's just do it in one go. I know that this seems a bit counterintuitive, but remember that this isn't planned, not one part of this video, and I'm actually gonna start out with my January TBR, just in case all you care about is what I'm reading in January. You could just stick around for this part of the video and then skedaddle on out of here. In planning my January TBR, I had a deep spiraling thought process where I discovered that I truly don't understand, I guess, the difference between TBR readers and then mood readers, because I plan a TBR every single month and I do a pretty good job at sticking with it, but I plan for a variety of moods that I'm going to be in. I don't necessarily plan in order to my TBR. I just make sure to include enough of a variety of books that if I'm not feeling like reading a certain one, I could just pick up another one. No, I kind of feel like I'm experiencing an identity crisis, but I also feel like we shouldn't only have TBR readers and mood readers. It should be fluid. Anyways, that conversation doesn't matter. I am in the mood in January though to read a bunch of space books, so that's what I am planning on doing. It was intentional to include a variety of sub-genres of space type books, so that way if I'm not feeling one, I could pick up another, I guess. The first space type book that I plan on reading is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This is the beginning of an expansive sci-fi series, and I am still unclear whether it is adult or young adult because the main character Darrow is 16. However, I looked it up and it is set on Mars. 1 year on Mars is the equivalent to 2 years on Earth. So he says that he's 16, but in Earth years, he's really in his early 30s. So is it YA? Is it adult? I guess I'm just gonna have to read to find out. This takes place in a world where Earth has recolonized 2 different planets, and in doing so, they have divided into different societies and factions that have different color labels, and Darrow is a part of the Red Society, which I believe is the lowest society. Early on in the plot, Darrow discovers that the higher societies of colors have been lying to the Reds, have been withholding information, and so I believe that there is a bit of upheaval and rebellion on Darrow's part, and he plans to, you know, eat the rich and defeat capitalism and all those things that we love to read about in science fiction. While I have plans to start a sci-fi series, I thought that it was only fair that I finish up another one. So I plan on reading Nixia Uprising, which is the 3rd and final installment in the Nixia Triad by Scott Rankton. This, I think, is a criminally underhyped young adult science fiction series, and it kind of has parallels to Red Rising because the whole setup of the first book, a bunch of teens are tapped to go to this planet to mine this otherworldly substance called Nixia, which is able to be manipulated into tools and weapons. Throughout this series, we follow this young group of teens that discovers that the corporation that sent them to this planet has withheld things and has lied to them, and so they team up together to defeat this corporation. I just love it so much. It's the perfect amount of angst and ridiculousness and desperation to find this family and this love that has been torn from them. I also wanted to make sure that I was including some earthbound space stuff in this TBR, so I have plans to read the final 6 by Alexandra Monier, which, full disclosure, I don't know a whole lot about. I think that it's a YA standalone. I believe that it involves space training. I think that there's a group of teens and they're training on Earth to go to space. I have no actual confirmation on this, and I could look it up on Goodreads right now, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to present this to you, and if it is incorrect, You'll hear about it in my January wrap up. Then my final space read of January that I hope to get to is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This is my first foyer into the works of Brandon Sanderson. This is a young adult, beginning of a young adult sci-fi series. Is it a duology? Is it a trilogy? I don't know. Again, I really don't know a whole lot about this one. I think that our main girl is in pilot training or like pilot school, and I think that she's not supposed to be, or it's like a surprise that she's there for some reason. I heard this compared a lot to Illuminae, not in plot, but just in like the banter between the characters and also the investment that you get in these characters, which was my favorite part about Illuminae. Also, some of my favorite parts of Illuminae were the in-flight sequences. I hope that since this involves flight pilot school, that we're gonna get some more of those intense battle flight banter over comms sequences that I loved so much in Illuminae. And I do have one more book that I plan to read in January that has nothing to do with space at all, and that is That Thing Around Your Neck by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This is a short story collection. In 2020, one of the things that I discovered about myself as a reader was that I really love short story collections and anthologies. So I set kind of a mini goal for myself that I'd really love to read at least one anthology or collection a month. So I think there are 12 different stories in here, and they just center around family and the culture of Nigeria and West Africa. When I read the first one, I thought that these were all going to be about the author's life. Like, I thought it was memoirs almost, but now that I've started the second story, I don't actually know that they're about the author at all. They may be completely fictional. Regardless, I'm really excited to read Adichie's writing. I really have enjoyed the first story so far, and I think that this is gonna be really good to have to pick up if I ever find myself getting burnt out on my space sci-fi stuff. I can read a couple of stories from this as sort of like a palate cleanser. I know, going back to this one, I don't know why I feel like this is necessary to include, but this size of book is my favorite size of book to read. Like this oversized paperback. Does anyone else feel me on that one? Okay, we've reached the conclusion of the January TBR / the book size discussion of this video, and now we're going to move on to my December wrap up. Technically, I guess I read 5 total books in the month of December, although I did complete Stephen King's The Stand at the beginning of December. I do not want to talk about it. You can watch my vlog for reading this video somewhere up here. Yes, I finished it in December, but it was 2.5 months in the making. Really don't want to spend any more time talking about this book on my channel, especially considering how little enjoyment I got out of it. This was 2 stars for me. First book that I started and completed in the month of December was The Smell of Other People's Houses by Bonnie Sue Hitchcock. This is a young adult historical fiction that's set in 1970s Alaskan wilderness. We're following the perspective of 4 different teenagers and how their lives intersect in some of the most beautifully soul-crushing ways that I have ever read. One of the teenagers that we're following finds out really early on that she is pregnant, and when she gives this news to her very strict Catholic grandmother that she has been raised by, she gets kicked out to live and deliver this baby at a convent. There is another teenage girl that we're following who has essentially abandoned her childhood home and lives with her best friend. She abandoned her childhood home to get away from her abusive alcoholic father and alcoholic mother. This other young teen girl who spends the summers with her father on his fishing boat, but she desperately wants to be a ballerina, and she spends the majority of the plot trying to reconcile those 2 different sides of her. And then the last perspective that we're following is this teenage boy who at the very beginning of the book takes his 2 younger brothers and runs away from their difficult living situation, and they end up on this boat in their running away. On that boat, the oldest boy whose perspective we're following loses one of his younger brothers. So we follow his story as he tries to run away from their difficult living situation, but then also is trying to relocate his younger brother that he has lost. I was so taken surprised by this one, and this is one of those books that hooked me in from page 1. The way that the teenagers' lives intersect and interweave is just painfully beautiful to read. It's very clear that the author, Bonnie Sue Hitchcock, is extremely familiar with this setting, both the time period and the Alaskan wilderness setting as well. I loved reading her descriptions. They were so visceral. Both like the setting was visceral and then the character emotions were visceral as well. The next book that I read was Sky Hunter by Marie Lu, and I never know how to describe the plots of like science fiction books, so I'm gonna do my best, but please be forgiving. The main character, whose name I already don't remember, Talon or Talon, and she lives in this city, I guess, that is basically the last free city against this federation that is taking over the world. And this federation has basically concocted this serum or vaccine that is able to be injected into humans and turns them into weapons of war. The main character living in this like last stand city is a part of this group of specialty trained soldiers that knows how to fight and defeat these weapons of war. At the very beginning of the book, Talon comes into contact with this prisoner that they believe to be captured from this federation. And it's about their relationship, discovering more about each other. It's kind of like a enemies to potentially lovers situation. I'm gonna be honest, I have like fond memories of reading this. I read it really quickly, but I can't actually remember anything significant enough to tell you that like, yes, I'm going to pick up the sequel when it comes out. I feel like I also had similar feelings when I read Marie Lu's Legend. Like I had a good time and I loved the experience when I was reading it. It wasn't impactful enough to actually leave a lasting impression on me. Solid YA science fiction fantasy. I don't think that it does anything particular new or exciting, but if you like science fiction fantasy, YA science fiction fantasy, you're gonna like this one, I bet. I think I gave this 4 stars, and I also am just now realizing that I don't think that I gave you my star rating for The Smell of Other People's Houses, which if you check Goodreads is 4 stars, but like this 4-star and this 4-star are not equal. But 2020 is over and I'm not going back and changing my star ratings now. Just know that my star ratings mean nothing and they're all circumstantial. These were both 4 stars, but I had very different investments in each of them. Also, one thing that I wanted to note about this, I am never gonna be done with this review. I think at the beginning of this review, I was like, I really have nothing to say about it, and I've been talking for 5 minutes now. One thing of note is that the main character in this is mute, which we learn was caused by a repressed sort of childhood trauma. Marie Lu is not own voices for that, so I thought that was just worth mentioning and bringing up, especially if you are the type of reader who looks for those kinds of things when picking up what you're gonna read next. Okay, next I read You Must Not Miss by Katrina Leno, my favorite cover of 2020. This is a young adult, surrealist, speculative kind of fiction. This we're following our main character, Magpie. Yes, Magpie. And Magpie is essentially dealing with her life having changed from idyllic to god-awful very, very quickly. Learn early on in the book that Magpie walked in on her father having an affair with her mother's sister, so her aunt, and that causes just a series of terrible, terrible things to happen. So to escape all of the darkness and the hardships that Magpie is going through, Magpie creates this parallel universe of her own, and I love it so much because the city or the town that Magpie lives in is called Farther, and this parallel town or city that she creates is called Near. Magpie essentially discovers that this universe Near that she has been writing about in her notebook, she is able to access this parallel universe and go into it and live in this idyllic world that she has created for herself. This idyllic world that she has created for herself includes the idyllic and perfect revenge for all of these people that have caused Magpie's life to shift so quickly. This book was one of those books that was simultaneously so difficult to read and impossible to put down. What Magpie goes through, I wanted to like reach into the book and hug her. Also at the same time, I was really, really scared of her. The way that Katrina Leno writes her kind of descent and disassociation from the town that she actually lives in was just really, really dark and terrifying, but so compelling to read. Usually I am not into ambiguous endings, but something about this one just really, really did it for me. So I full on plan after reading this one to pick up more of Katrina Leno's writing in 2021. I gave this one 4 stars. I picked up and read Everybody Looking by Candace Ilo. This is a novel that is written in verse, and we are basically jumping around to different parts in our main character Ada's life. Time in her life that we are following is her first freshman year in college. She is a first generation Nigerian college student. And you also get time jumps into her childhood and her adolescence, and it's basically just a bunch of snippets from her life, and you are learning how things that she experienced as a child with her mother and her father and just family in general are affecting her ability to thrive and flourish in her freshman year of college, which is her first time away from her family. I do have a reading vlog for this one too, where I really go into my thoughts about how I wish more books existed with main characters that are in the age range of Ada, which is going into their freshman year of college. I think that it's such a transformative and kind of almost like a second adolescence, kind of second coming of age for a lot of young people, and it's not written about in books enough. And if it is, kind of pigeonholed into like a new adult romance category, which I'm not saying that new adult romance is bad, but I just wish that there was kind of more new adult aged main characters in contemporary novels. This is Ilo's debut, and just from reading kind of the author bio on the back flap, I think that large parts of Ada's storyline are based off of Ilo's experiences. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I'm really, really looking forward to following along with this author and just seeing what it is that they create next. And then the last book, technically I finished it in January, but I just really don't want it to be considered my first read of 2021. I read the majority of it in December 2020, so I'm including it in this wrap up for that reason, but also because I know that if I wait until the end of January to try and talk about this book, I won't have anything remotely coherent to say about it. That book is White Tears by Harry Kunzru. This is an adult psychological book. I don't really know how to describe it. I guess it's no, it's not a mystery, it's not a thriller, it's just like this psychological, I don't know. Okay. I'm sorry, it was just so difficult for me to comprehend. Okay, so essentially we're following 2 university-aged men living in New York who are really trying their best to be up and coming and make it in the music industry. As they are trying to make it in this music industry, they stumble across this old blues song, at least one of them does. And in their discovery of this old blues song from the Deep South during the time of slavery, it essentially changes the trajectory of both of their lives. One of them ends up becoming obsessed with this song. Well, they both kind of do, but one of them gets very scared of it, whereas the other one becomes very obsessed with wanting to kind of co-opt it and then sell it and claim it as his own. Whereas the other one kind of gets sent on this journey about the origins of this song and who created it and who it's about, I guess. This was a very, very difficult book for me to get through and for me to comprehend. We're essentially following one of the 2 men's descent and disassociation from reality and then descent into madness. The writing style was really, really hard for me to keep up with. The author doesn't use quotation marks to indicate dialogue, so much of my reading experience was me trying to figure out if the main character was actually saying something out loud or if he was saying it in his head, and then also trying to determine if what was being said by another character. I think that that was the intention on the part of the author, but I just wasn't invested enough in the story. I didn't jive enough with the writing style to try and work my way through and figure out who was saying what. For that reason, I actually do really highly recommend this audiobook, which I ended up checking out and I was so grateful for, because there's only one narrator, but they do change their inflection. So I at least understood when other characters were supposed to be saying something versus when the main character was having their own personal thoughts or saying something. This was a book that tried to do a whole lot, and I am not the authority, I don't think, on whether or not the author did them well. Honestly, I think that I really would have enjoyed reading this in my undergrad when I was majoring in English. I could have had really like text lit analysis discussions with other people, so that way I could pose my own thoughts and then have them sort of played off of and developed by the opinions of others. I think that the author was trying to bring up themes of like cultural appropriation and how for hundreds of years white people have been stealing from Black culture while simultaneously oppressing them and enslaving them. I also think that the author tried to bring up themes and discussion points surrounding white guilt. Again, the writing was just so hard for me to follow because we are reading from the perspective of a main character who is supposed to be descending into madness because of this unearthed blues song. Just really difficult for me to be able to comprehend the discussions and the themes that were supposed to be being brought up. So I think that I'm gonna end up giving this 3 stars. It's not something that I super enjoyed the reading experience for. However, it is a book that I'm going to be thinking about for a long, long time. And I also am still really, really interested in Harry Kunzru's writing. I think that he has just such an array of books and settings and characters and plot lines that I can't let my opinion of him be affected by just this one book. And that is all. We have reached the end of this back-to-back January TBR and December reading wrap-up. Thank you so much if you stuck around this long. Hope that you all are taking care of yourselves and using reading as escapism if you need it, and then also using reading as a learning tool and mechanism if you need it. Appreciate each and every one of you so much, and let me know your thoughts on, well, really anything, but I guess the books that I brought up in this video as well. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Goodbye.